Welcome to Restless Heart Media, an apostolate of the Oblates of St. Augustine. It's thanks to our generous benefactors that we can provide you with this online content to inspire and nurture your growth in the interior life, and to preserve for the Church a traditional form of the Augustinian religious life. Mass is offered weekly for our generous benefactors, as well as our divine office and our daily sacrifices. To share in our mission and graces, you can visit www.oblatesofstaugustine.org/giving. God bless. We're able to live the spiritual life, or whether we're able to imitate Christ's life.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this new episode as Father Martin and I go through Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales using the Baronius Press edition. Welcome, everybody. How are you, Father?
Doing well, Alberto. How are you?
I'm doing well. Very excited for this episode because we will be going through chapters 31, 32, 33, and 34. Which means, if you have the Baronius Press edition, you would know that we are going to be speaking a lot, Father, about recreation, about what is lawful and what is not lawful, about plays, dances, and so on and so forth. So we may have some stuff that is a little bit controversial
Oh yeah, it's gonna be
for
fun.
the audience.
This is definitely gonna be fun. You hear a lot of people talking about this all the time on social media.
Exactly. Well, maybe the audience, those that have been following us along, maybe they have already been preparing themselves to be triggered by having been triggered in
If they haven't
other
already
episodes.
been.
Exactly. So we'll get right to it. Chapter 31 of pastimes and recreations, and first of such as are lawful and praiseworthy. What does St. Francis tell us, Father, about those that are lawful and praiseworthy?
It is necessary sometimes to refresh our spirit and our body, also by some kind of recreation. Cassian relates that one day a hunter found St. John the Evangelist holding a partridge in his hand, which he was stroking by way of recreation. The hunter asked him how he, being so great a man, could waste his time upon a thing so mean and trivial. And St. John said to him, "Why dost thou not always carry thy bow stretched?" "For fear," replied the hunter, "lest, being always stretched, it should lose its power of resilience, which is essential to its usefulness." "Do not be astonished, then," replied the apostle, "if I sometimes relax the application and attention of my spirit, to take a little recreation, in order to apply myself afterwards more earnestly to contemplation. There can be no doubt that it is a defect to be so rigorous, or some might use the word rigid, boorish, and unsociable as not to be willing to take any recreation oneself, or permit others to do so. To take the air, to go for a walk, to take part in cheerful and friendly conversations, to play the lute or other instrument, to sing to the accompaniment of music, to go hunting, are recreations so proper that, to make a good use of them, we need only use ordinary prudence, which gives to all things order, time, place, and measure. So that was a pretty good analogy, I think, that he used there with St. John the Evangelist and Cassian.
Oh yes, that really was a great one. And I was sort of wondering when you would stop reading, but as you were going, it just kept getting better and better. Especially where he gets to, of course, the example of Saint John the Evangelist is very good, but it is also very good where Saint Francis gets to basically unpacking this explanation this example that he had just given, where he says, "There can be no doubt that it is a defect to be so rigorous, boorish, and unsociable." So I think that this is one thing. I don't want to necessarily say that like all trats fall into it, because it is. I think even in Novus Ordo world, people that want to seem as if they are very holy and very devout fall into this. Even of course, strats that want to appear as if they are so holy and all that stuff, they also fall into this. But then this comes, Father, sort of right after last episode where we were speaking about judging.
Hmm.
So St. Francis here says, we need only to use ordinary prudence, which gives to all things order, time, place, and measure. So how many times do we not would judge somebody for doing a certain thing of recreation and then say, oh, that he should be doing other things. But then we have here the example of St. John, where St. John says that to have the bow stiff all the time, meaning ready to be fired, so to speak, would make the bow lose its power. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I especially like how he says, I do this in order to apply myself afterwards more earnestly to contemplation. So it wasn't just his schedule. It was like it's the purpose of his life, the contemplation of truth. I mean, he's the Saint John the Apostle, the evangelist. I mean, that's his vocation, right? Is contemplation. And so he's saying, sometimes you just need to take a break from something in order to be able to continue to do it better afterwards. And if I remember correctly, St. John Bosco pretty much said the same thing when he was encountering a lot of young boys in the streets or whatever, and they were being, busy working hard because it was, in the late 1800s, so the time of the Industrial Revolution, and of course, child labor laws, even in the United States, were pretty insane, like 12, 14-hour work days, even for children. And St. John the Bosco had to intervene for them to their employer, saying, "Listen, if you give these boys time for recreation, they'll be able to do better work for you in the hours that they actually work for you." So recreation, as St. Francis de Sales was saying, very first sentence, is necessary. It's something necessary regarding our human nature. But as you were saying, Alberto, I think especially as we were talking in our last episode about rash judgments, I think a lot of people try to invent rules around this so that only certain recreations are okay according to their personal standards and their arbitrary standards. Because if we look at the saints, as we'll continue to look, I mean, St. Francis will explain what qualifies as legitimate, healthy recreation and what does not. But a lot of times we try to make things even more strict and try to hold other people to the standards that we invent for ourselves.
exactly. And then very often, Father, it ends up happening. And as we see here in the book, St. Francis gives us principles and then we take them and then we live by them. He very, very rarely will, unless it is something that it is sort of unquestionably immoral, but very rarely does he go in and then give us a specific example and then say, oh, if you do this, then it's a sin. If you do that,
Mm,
he gives us principles and then we live by them. But I think that in our personal lives, we can very often be extremely harsh either with ourselves or with others. And then in the following paragraph, he says, games in which the success serves as a reward and recompense for skill and industry of body or of mind are recreations good in themselves and lawful. So how many times do we hear trats saying, "Oh, such and such game is bad," or you should never play? So now, of course, does Saint Francis make the distinction that depending on how much actual effort or how much of our actual mind it takes, then they may become bad? Well, absolutely.
hmm
But just in and of themselves, he says, such are games of tennis, ball, pall mall, tilting at the ring, chess, and backgammon. Sort of little board games, tennis, ball games, and so on and so forth. So it would be, I think St. Francis would consider it an error, Father, to say, oh, if to play football recreationally a couple times, it's a sin.
yeah, I guess I think he'll go deeper into that when he talks about in not this next chapter, but the following chapter on balls and sometimes which are permissible but dangerous. But nevertheless, I think what he's talking about here is there's games like board games where the majority of the game is dependent on dice, is dependent on chance, is dependent on like in the game of life, you have a little wheel that you spin. There are games that don't require a lot of thinking, a lot of strategy, and therefore they don't use the uniquely human faculties of our intellect, of our reason. Um, but there's other games, even card games, that do require that. I mean, I personally like board games, play board games in religious communities often. And to be honest, the ones that we find most fun are precisely the board games that require you to think and require you to come up with a strategy. I mean, there's always some element of chance there, right? You have to play with the cards you're dealt with, but even then, you can come up with a different strategy and still, if not play competitively, win. And so definitely there are games that require more chance than strategy, and there are games definitely that require more strategy and thinking than chance.
Then in the following paragraph in the middle of page 199, St. Francis says, "But above all, be careful, Philotea, not to set your affection on such things. For however proper a recreation may be, it is a defect to set your heart and affection on it. I do not say that we should not take pleasure in a game, whilst we are actually playing it, for otherwise it would not be a recreation. But I say that we must not set our affection on games to such an extent that we long for them, occupy ourselves with them, and become too eager about them." So there we go. So as we have been saying, Father St. Francis gives us the principles, but then doesn't say, oh, if you play this 3 times a week, then that's bad. You can only play it 2 times for half an hour. No, he gives us the principles, and then we are supposed to take those and then apply them to our own life, to the lives of our children, and all that. When many times we want a very specific answer, like, okay, if I pray for specifically 30 minutes a day, I will become holier, as if it was like a recipe. Not saying that praying 30 days a day is not necessary for holiness, but
Mm,
it's not like holiness and virtue is not like a recipe book where you sort of follow step one, follow step two, set the oven at such and such, and then it all will turn out exactly as we expected. That is not how our daily lives work.
exactly. And I think one of the things that we kind of skipped over, but it was a perfect words that he used is to guard against excess. Excess. What does that mean? He makes a distinction between a recreation and an occupation. You're not recreating, you're being occupied by something if you do it too much. And if your affections are attached to it, all of a sudden it starts to consume your mind, your affections, to where it actually then becomes a distraction to the necessary things that you're supposed to be doing instead. It was supposed to be a relief from something, but now it's become something that makes you weary and tired, and in and of itself another burden.
Yep, that's definitely something to watch for. We're going to chapter 32 of Forbidden Games. Goes a little bit here further about something that you were just speaking about. Games of dice, of cards, and such like, in which the success depends principally on chance, are not only dangerous recreations like dances, but they are, when viewed in themselves, which, by the way, where he says dangerous recreations like dances, later on we are going to see and find out a little bit more about what he's specifically talking about. Are not only dangerous recreations like dances, but they are, when viewed in themselves and apart from other considerations, evil and blameworthy, and therefore they are forbidden by the laws, both civil and ecclesiastical. But you will say to me, what great harm is there in them? Success in these games is not won according to reason, but according to chance, which very often favors him who, as far as skill and industry are concerned, deserves nothing. Reason is outraged thereby. But you will say to me, we agreed to it. So, anyway, basically, he's saying if you're playing a game that is purely chance, then that would be pretty much forbidden. And I do like how he says, well, that's because pretty much somebody can win that does not deserve it, that it does not have any merit.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that would probably include like little slot games nowadays, maybe the roulette and a lot of the games that are played at casinos. I think very rarely do people usually get together privately and then play. I mean, I suppose some do, but I don't think it's that common that people just get together for like no reason and then play games of chance outside nowadays of casinos. Anyway,
Mhm. But also, I guess there's also games for little children. They make just little card games for children just to do something fun or whatever. But sometimes the children kind of demand that the adults play with them, and you're just kind of sitting there just like bored out of your mind, like because there is no use of reason, because it's made for children beneath the age of reason, right? So you can't really train them to use this faculty just yet. But yeah, you can see when there's games that are completely and totally 100% about chance. And not only that, but how frustrating it is just to even sit there and do it, because it's okay, I could be doing something else in my time or something.
Exactly. In the following paragraph, he says, besides this, these games bear the name of recreation and are intended to serve that purpose, and yet they are by no means such, but rather engrossing occupations. For is it not an occupation to keep the mind occupied and strained by continual attention and agitated by continual anxiety, apprehension, and solicitude? So basically, when we you play other games that maybe do occupy our mind, that helps us relax. But when we are playing these games, Father, where it's completely and entirely to chance, we are not necessarily maybe concerned about a strategy, which in a sense does relax the mind, but we are just pretty much concerned about something for which we do nothing. Like you roll a dice, and whomever rolls the dice uh, with the higher number wins, which we were doing. I think may have been yesterday or so. As you mentioned, with children below the age of reason, there's no you can't play a game where there are set rules and regulations that you have to follow, and then take skill and strategy. So we found a little tiny dice, and so my 4-year-old wanted it, but then I said, no, I'm not going to give it to you because who knows, maybe one of the younger one may swallow it, and I mean it's a very easy to choke, like a choking hazard dice.
Hmm.
So then we were just like basically tossing it, and whoever did the highest number would win. I was playing this with a 4-year-old. She was having so much fun. But anyway, let's see. Then if I started playing that with somebody above the age of reason, it's very dumb. And then
Yeah.
not only is it very dumb, but then, well, the only way to make it fun, sort of, a lot of the times, is to bet some money or some higher stakes thing, and then start getting into even more trouble.
Hmm.
In fine, there is no joy at all in gambling except for the winner, and is not this joy blameworthy, since it can only be had through the loss and displeasure of the loser. Such rejoicing is certainly unrighteous. For these three reasons, games of chance are forbidden. The great King St. Louis, hearing that his brother, the Count of Anjou, and Monsieur Gautier de Nemours were gambling, rose up, sick as he was, and went tottering to their chamber, and there he took the tables, the dice, and part of the money, and threw them out of the window into the sea, being very angry with them. The holy and chaste maiden Sarah, when speaking to God of her innocence, said, Thou knowest, O Lord, that I have never joined myself with them that play. This is from the book of Tobias. But then we take that, Father, and then we think that, oh, if you play pretty much anything whatsoever, it's bad. But this is why it's important to have a little bit of good interpretation of these passages.
Exactly. Well, we skipped over a sentence that I tweeted last night when I was preparing for this episode. That I found pretty funny. Is there any attention more sad, more gloomy and melancholy than that of gamesters? That was funny. So, video games. What do you think, Alberto?
Video games. If we stick strictly through this,
Uh huh.
I think that it does require some skill, like with moving the fingers or
The
whatever.
controller or
Like
whatever. Yeah.
I think there was a part of a Joe Rogan interview that people were posting on Twitter, where I think he's speaking with Elon Musk or whatever, and then I forget what exactly it was, but Elon Musk was talking about how certain people with certain occupations do very well in video games. I have never been good. Like even when I was young, I never liked playing like the Call of Duties or the shooting video games or whatever, because I was
Mhm.
so bad at it. So my parents didn't let us play. They did let sort of loosen up a little bit with my younger brother, but they never let me play like violent video games because I don't like them.
Mhm.
And now I don't like them either. Which is, by the way, funny when people say, "Oh, if you prohibit things for your children, they will just want to do them so much." I don't like them to this day, and my parents didn't let me play them when I was younger. So there we go. But anyway, I was also never good at them when we would play them at friends' houses or whatever. So I usually, if I'm not good at a game or can find like a way to be like decently competitive, I don't like playing at all. So for example, when we would play soccer, I have relatively decent reflexes. So I was always like an above average goalkeeper, but I'm not very fast. So that was sort of like a you know sort of good compromise. I'm also like have a little bit of a bigger build than
That's a
most
nice way to put
people,
it.
and so like the shorter or skinnier guys always, like when it came to like basically clashing with people that have like soccer builds like you, Father. I always had that advantage. But anyway, I was not a soccer player, but when we would play recreationally, that's what I would play, and I liked playing it because I was not completely horrible. If I had been completely horrible, I would hate it, and I would not like to play it one bit.
Uh-huh.
So anyway,
But
but then I don't know. I think there are other types of video games that are probably fine, but usually it happens that people go in and then play video games, and they'll play for 2 or 3 hours.
yeah, that's the
Uh,
issue.
exactly. Like for example, I have friends that are not married, that are single and looking to get married or whatever, and then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I don't have a family. I work, do very well for myself, and then in the evenings, once in a while, we like several of the guys that are not married, they get together and they play for a couple of hours." I think that's probably fine in some extent, but then like especially like because I think I used to condemn him 100%. But if people like different types of recreation, and then that is your recreation, I may not like it. But if you're single and don't really have any other duties or responsibilities, I think it's probably fine. But I'm sure that in some religious communities, Father, they go and then they play them for like hours and hours and hours, and it's hard. Like even though I never played it, I do know that it's hard to go and then play for just 1 hour, so to speak, like the Call of Duty or whatever, or Battlefield or whatever. I don't even know what games they play now. So I don't know. I think
I
it
think
just really depends.
yeah, I think St. Francis de Sales really lays on the principle in one, the access, and two, kind of what I was reading. The sentence after, no one must speak or laugh or cough while play is going on, otherwise they will be annoyed. I think video games in particular, they make them to be addictive. They make you want to play for more than 1 hour. Kind of like social media, it gets you like that dopamine rush or whatever. Every time you see likes, you get likes on your posts, you get likes on your Instagram pictures, whatever else. There's a certain addiction to virtual reality that I guess we all kind of tend to. That makes,
Right.
like you said, playing video games um, in an acceptable amount of time for acceptable reasons to be difficult. And so one definitely needs to be on their guard in that respect. But also, as we were saying, the use of reason versus just mere chance. Um, well, in order to be recreated, we definitely still need to be using our human faculties and stuff. So it can't be a game that is just about like in a sense shooting zombies or whatever else, because there's nothing there except getting a laser gun and just being crazy. But I mean, when I was growing up, I had a PlayStation 2. I'm that old. PlayStation 2. I ended up selling it for when I was 14 years old for guitar pickups because I wanted to become a professional guitar player, which I did. But even then, the only times I ever played is, I mean, I very rarely ever go to my cousin's house anymore, my younger cousins. But we grew up, high school, whatever, playing with each other, and that was our fraternal time. That was the time we shared. Like we spent majority of our time, like we were best friends as cousins. So every now and then to reawaken old rivalries, the three of us will go in the rounds playing FIFA or Madden, and those were our games growing up. And of course, I'll beat them, even though I haven't played in like several years. But I'm the older of the three, so of course I still dominate. But we'll play one game and then we'll go drink and smoke cigars or something, and fraternize in that way. But um, yeah, nevertheless, it's there's nothing intrinsically evil about them. I mean, if you think about it, even a flight simulator is a video game, and that it actually helps you to practice things that you'll be using in reality. When I was a kid,
Mhm.
my mom always brought home a flight simulator, and I love the thing because her job was like aviation education or something like that. So she actually had a flight simulator for her job. Um, but yeah, it's like a lot of people would just give like a universal blanket, like a no to video games thing. But I mean, we take the same approach as St. Francis de Sales does: is you give principles and you apply these principles.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's especially considering, at least in my opinion, usually men like video games, or boys would like video games more than women. So I don't have any boys yet, so I don't really think that I necessarily have a lot to worry about there. But definitely, I don't think that I would let my children play video games when they're in their formative years. Maybe when they get to sort of adulthood and they want to play them on their own. It's sort of difficult. Like if somebody likes to play a couple of hours a week, I think it's hard to go to having read what we just read from St. Francis de Sales
Hmm.
and then just blanket condemn them. I think
Hmm.
somebody likes to play a couple of hours a week, that would probably be fine, if because that wouldn't be something that would basically take over the responsibilities or prayer time or anything like that. But then it seems to me that according to what we just read, it would go according to the application. Just like he says, for example, playing ball games is perfectly good if
but
you
dangerous.
go to the excess. What's that?
Exactly. Well, there's also this middle category: good but dangerous, or like permissible but dangerous.
Exactly. And then you have, for example, the professional sports nowadays where like football games pretty much last like 3 hours and a half.
Hmm.
And I think that's excessive. Like to in order to watch a whole football game, you have to pretty much sit down for 3 hours and a half. That's a lot.
Hmm.
And then soccer matches usually last for 2 hours, maybe once a week or so. That is seeming to me more manageable. Like to watch a soccer game a couple of hours a week. It starts and it ends, and sometimes it happens that you're like, oh, I want to watch this game, and then you forget about it because you're working or whatever that may be, and then time flies by. Maybe you can only watch half. So anyway, so that seems to be more manageable than to sit down and watch a 3 hour and a half football
Or
game.
or worse, baseball.
Baseball, yeah, baseball is it's I think actually fine to watch. Like if you're at the game, but it's same thing. It's like 3 hours long, and they play
Or
like
more.
every day during the
Yeah, you
season.
can go 14, 15. I think the longest game is like 17 innings or something like that.
Yes. So
Restless Heart Media is funded by your generous financial support. Visit www.oblatesofstaugustine.org/giving to become a patron. Restless Heart Media. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you.
anyway, moving on to chapter 33 of balls and pastimes which are permissible but dangerous. Dances and balls are things indifferent in themselves, but the ordinary way in which they are carried out makes them very much turned and inclined towards the side of evil, and consequently full of danger and peril. They take place at night, and in the darkness and obscurity, it is easy for secret and sinful things to occur. In the case of those who of themselves are very susceptible to evil, they are prolonged far into the night, after which the mornings of the following days are lost, and consequently the means of serving God in them. And this is going to pause myself here really quick. This is something very true. I think that as one starts maturing, because we hear this whole, oh, I'm a morning person, I'm a night person. When you realize the absolute blessing that it is to wake up early, then it becomes difficult for one to say, oh, I'm going to go pretty much party all
Buddy,
night.
yeah.
Exactly. And then you wake up at noon or at 1 p.m. the following day, and you already, like, especially like in the fall and winter months, then you lost like incredible hours already. So anyway, that's just wanted to mention that, which it's interesting that even St. Francis de Sales mentions that is one of the negative consequences of doing such thing.
Mm.
At a ball, everyone vies with everyone else in vanity, and vanity is so great a disposition to evil affections and to dangerous and reprehensible loves that all of this is easily engendered at dances. So there we go. He comes out striking right away against dances, but similarly as in the rest of the book, he is going to qualify that a little bit further on.
So he says, I say to you of dances, Philothea, what physicians say of pumpkins and mushrooms. I hate mushrooms. Anyway, the the best are of no value, so they say. And I say to you that the best balls can scarcely be called good. However, if you must eat pumpkins, take care that they are well prepared. If, on some occasion, when you cannot well excuse yourself, you must go to a ball, take care that your dancing be well ordered. But how is it to be well ordered? With modesty, with dignity, and with good intention. Eat mushrooms, but seldom, say the physicians, and only eat a little, for however well prepared they may be, they are poisonous if taken in any quantity. Dance but seldom, Philothea, and only a little, for if you act otherwise, you will run a risk of setting your affections upon it. So he's basically saying only go to dances if you have to. Don't like going to dances, only go to dances if you have to.
So I do have to interrupt, Father, and say that a very, very good way of eating mushrooms would be like on pizza. Great. Tastes great.
No, thank you. No thing. It's a
Mushrooms,
fungus.
according to it, tastes great on pizza. That's what I've been saying. Our friend Bug Hall posted recently that I forget what exactly he posted, and then I said that's why people who that the bad opinions or something should be challenged, and so that's
Mhm.
why I said that people who oppose pineapple on pizza should be opposed by all means, and so mushrooms on pizza are also taste pretty good.
Alrighty, I'm
Mushrooms,
never.
according to Pliny, being spongy and porous, easily absorb whatever infection may be near them, so that if they are near to serpents, they absorb their poison. Balls, dances, and such like night assemblies ordinarily attract the vices and sins that reign in a place: strife, envy, mockery, wanton love. And as these exercises open the pores of the bodies of those who take part in them, so they open the pores of the heart, with the result that if some serpent thereupon breathe into the ear some lascivious suggestion, some frivolous words of love, some flattering speech, or if some basilisk indulge in unchaste looks or wanton glances, the heart readily suffers itself to be seized upon and poisoned. Very true. Again, I'm always astonished, Father, that he's writing this in the 1600s at the time that he lived, but it sounds a lot like we see nowadays. It's really, things don't necessarily change a whole lot.
Well, dancing has definitely got a lot dirtier since then. There they had, the line dances and all that kind of stuff and group dances that they all just, didn't really have a partner. They just, did it all together. Nowadays, I mean, you can think about, even like I grew up in public school and like the first dances were like 7th, 8th grade. So it's an over sexualization of children, Ophilothea. These unsuitable recreations are ordinarily dangerous. They dissipate the spirit of devotion, weaken the spiritual forces, cause charity to grow cold, and stir up in the soul all kinds of evil affections, and therefore they are to be used with great prudence. But
He
especially
says
after eating.
after,
Go ahead.
go on, Father.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that in the following paragraph, he says that we should make some holy and good considerations after going to dances,
And he
if you
lists
have to.
5. Yeah. And he lists about 5 of them. What are these considerations, Alberto?
They are number one, at the very time when you were at the ball, many souls were burning in hell, fire for sins committed at dances. Number two, many religious and persons of devotion were at that very time in the presence of God, singing his praises and contemplating his beauty. Of course,
Oh, how much?
time much better spent.
Yeah.
Number three was you were dancing, many persons were dying in great anguish, thousands and thousands. Number four, our Lord, our Lady, the angels, and the saints behold you at the ball. Oh, how much did they pity you, seeing your heart taken up with so vain an amusement and occupied with such trifles. And this is very true. St. Francis does speak about this throughout the book, that when you place yourself in the presence of God, your decorum and your behavior should change. So if we are dances and all these horrible things are going on, of course, as Father said, this is what we have nowadays is even worse than what's going on at the time of St. Francis. But he's saying, you know, you were at the dance, and our Almighty God is looking at you, and you know you could be using your time better. And then number five, alas, while you were there, time was slipping by, and death was drawing nearer. See how he mocks you and invites you to his dance, in which the groans of your friends will be the music, and where you will make but one passage from life to death. This dance is the real pastime of mortals, since by it they pass in a moment from time to an eternity, either of happiness or of suffering. I set down these little considerations for you, but God will suggest to you many others of a like kind, if you have his holy feet. Very much a very striking, Father, this five considerations that St. Francis gives.
Definitely the second one kind of hit me because, I mean, it's probably never something I would have considered in my high school or college years. Many religious and persons of devotions were at that very time in the presence of God, singing his praises and contemplating his beauty. Oh, how much more profitable was their time spent than yours? That's a pretty neat one.
And of course, considering that souls are burning in hell for the sins that they committed in those very same events, that people are dying at that very same moment. So anyway, all those considerations are very, 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 very good. Moving on to chapter 34. when we may play or dance. That playing and dancing may be permissible, we should take part in such things for the sake of recreation, and not merely from fondness of them, for a short time only, and not till we are wearied or languid, and but seldom, for whosoever makes the practice of doing so turns recreation into occupation. But on what occasions may we play or dance? Just occasions of dancing and of games that are in themselves indifferent are more frequent. Occasions of forbidden games are rarer, inasmuch as such games are much more blameworthy and dangerous. But in a word, play and dance according to the conditions which I have laid down for you, when to condescend and give pleasure to the company in which you find yourself, prudence and discretion counsel you to do so. For condescension, being an offshoot of charity, makes indifferent things good and dangerous things permissible. Father, really quick, could you? So this phrase that Saint Francis says, for condescension is an offshoot of charity. What is this? Can you explain this a little bit?
Well, in the sense that when our Lord took on a human nature, he condescended to being uh, also a human being. He was God, and he took on the form that was less than God. So condescension is an offshoot in charity in the sense that when you condescend down to people that are less than you, of a lesser state, or maybe not as advanced in holiness or whatever, the purpose of the condescension should rather be to lift them up. It shouldn't, like in the same way that our Lord condescended to being to taking on a human nature to lift us up. God, as Saint Augustine said, God became man so that man might become sons of God. And so that's the purpose of a condescension, is to lift others up, and not so that you condescend down to to their level and you stay at their level. In one sense, instead of you evangelizing them, they evangelize you, or they'd rather de-evangelize you. So that's what condescension being an offshoot of charity means.
Great. And then in the following paragraph, he lists Saint Francis of Saint Francis. I was going to say Saint Francis of Assisi. Saint Francis de Sales lists several examples of the saints. He says, "It gave me much pleasure to read in the life of Saint Charles Borromeo that he condescended to the Swiss in certain things, wherein otherwise he was very severe, and that blessed Ignatius of Loyola, when invited to play, accepted the invitation. As to Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, she played and danced sometimes when she found herself in recreated assemblies, without prejudice to her devotion, which was so deeply rooted in her soul that, as the rocks which surround the lake of Riti grow when they are beaten by the waves, so her devotion grew amid the pomps and vanities to which her state of life exposed her." So this being part of her state of life, and we see this father a lot in saints that were kings, queens, princesses, princes, and so on and so forth, different type of royalty, that sort of their state of life made them do certain things that for other people would not be necessarily conducive to holiness, but they were able to grow in holiness amidst these things that that sort of Almighty God, by giving them that state of life, handed to them.
Absolutely. And well, more recently, I've been reading the biography of Blessed Charles de Foucauld, who and it's kind of really striking because it really emphasizes this point in terms of your state of life, your vocation, and then how sanctification is uniquely carried out, uniquely fashioned by God in each of our souls, so individually for each and every single one of us. In the sense that Blessed Charles de Foucauld had this real desire to be just so incredibly poor and solitude and silence, and so he entered a monastic community, the Trappist, which are like the Benedictines. They use the rule of Saint Benedict, but they also, in one sense, carry out more practically the poverty of Saint Francis of Assisi, in the sense that they refute. Well, he wanted to not own property and all that kind of stuff. So the more uh, intense, impoverished monastic community that existed were the Trappists, the Cistercians of the strict observance. But even that wasn't poor enough for him. And so then that's when he left to start his own little community. But it's like, based on who he was beforehand, a military officer in the French army, and all of the attachments that he made in that way of life, um, the desires that the Holy Ghost was inspiring within him was precisely to fashion his sanctification contrary to what his heart had become attached to living his life. Obviously, not all of us have the same attachments to certain things, and so it makes certain sense that a certain way of life we're led to providentially, precisely to detach us from the things that we personally have become attached to, which other people might have not, and to grow in charity in the way that we're meant to, and other people are supposed to grow in charity in other ways. Um, so that's why St. Francis de Sales has to give, especially a lot of lay people, with all the different circumstances everybody has, merely the principles, precisely because your holiness is going to be fashioned uniquely according to you. When I was a kid, actually, even now, I have plantar fasciitis, and what's kind of funny is for plantar fasciitis, you need orthotics, so like a insert in the sole to keep your arch up and supported. But when I was a kid, I had a hard time finding ones that fit, because when I was playing soccer, like they'd move and I'd have injuries because the arch support would move forward, and then I'd get these massive um, I don't know, cuts or whatever else from the orthotics. So I had to go and get my foot plashed and have one specifically formed to my foot, specifically formed out of cork for my foot. Um, and I just use that as a simple analogy for God bringing about all of our sanctifications. Like there's a way, there's a situations, there's a state of life, and even within that state of life, even though everything seems to be either mechanical or standard, there's something still unique and personal for each and every single one of us, that it might be good for one person going to dances, whatever else, might be very much more worse for another person, all depending on one's attachments and affections.
Oh, absolutely. And then St. Francis finishes the chapter by saying, "Great fires are increased by the wind, but little ones are extinguished if they be not well protected from it." And I would say, Father, to finish out the chapter and the episode, that I think that it would be the most prudent for us to always err on the side of thinking that our fire is little. Because if you think that your fire is, you have a little fire that can be put away by the wind, and so you don't attend to different things that are dangerous, you're safe. Our little fire of our devotion is like this big or smaller, like maybe the size of a little match.
Yep.
And so if we keep that in mind, then it's a little bit easier to stay safe. And then this is where humility and having the right view of ourselves and all that comes into play. And it's important to have a director that is able to assist us with understanding properly ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, better safe than sorry.
Exactly. If you have a little fire of a little size of a match and then it goes out, then it's like during the Easter vigil, when the fire starts, and when it's little, it just starts out. It may go out, but once it's up and going, the wind just makes it get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. But then when
Yeah,
it's just starting out, it can die very easily if the wind blows out really hard.
as we know from this past Holy Saturday where we couldn't get the fire started.
Exactly. So there we go. Thank you, everybody, for following along this episode where we just went through basically plays and recreations and what St. Francis de Sales recommends as permissible and not permissible. We're using the Baronius Press edition of Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. This is a production of Restless Hearts Media, an apostolate of the Oblates of St. Augustine. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel, but most importantly, and Fabio can tell us this, most importantly, donate to the Oblates of St. Augustine.
www.oblatesofstaugustine.org. Thank you all. See you all next week. God bless. Thank you for watching another video on Restless Heart Media. You can take part in providing more spiritually nourishing content by supporting our monastery. Visit www.oblatesofstaugustine.org/giving. God bless.